Happy Saturday, everybody. I'm hoping that you guys are still well in your little bubbles and that you're doing tons of really fun stuff with your mums and dads and that you're not driving them crazy and that you're healthy and happy and that you know that I miss you. Um, can't wait to be back at school and just have a chat with you guys in the playground. That's what I want. um, we're going to continue reading chapter 8 from our book. It's really starting to get a bit exciting now. Just a little reminder that he stayed awake in the cave, lying on his tummy, waiting for the traitor, and he was convinced that it was Hubert, but in fact, it was Jossie. So I'm going to continue reading. It was Jossie and none other. It took me a moment or so to take it in. Jossie, the person who had been so kind and so happy and red-cheeked and who had given me cakes and comforted me when I was sad, he was the traitor. And here he was, sitting by the fire, only a short way away from me, together with those Tanglemen. Vader and Kader, he called them, explaining why he hadn't come earlier. Hubert's out hunting wolves in the mountains, and I had to keep out of sight, you see. Come and join us, Noah. Vader and Kader looked sullen all the same, and Jossie went on. Surely you haven't forgotten about Hubert. You ought to have him in Cutler Cavern too, because he also hates Tangle. Then I think you should do something about it, said Vader. For you are our man in Cherry Valley, aren't you? Said Kader. Of course, said Jossie. He fawned and cringed. But Vader and Kader didn't like him. I could see that. I suppose no one likes a traitor, even if he has his uses. But he was allowed to keep his ears. They didn't cut them off, but they did something else. They put the cutler mark on him. All Tanglemen have to carry the cutler mark, even a traitor like you, said Vader, so that you can show them who you are if any spies who don't know you come to Cherry Valley. Of course, said Jossie. They ordered him to open his jacket and shirt, and with a branding iron, which they had heated in the fire, they burned the mark of Cutler on his chest. Shh! Jossie cried out when he was touched by the glowing iron. Feel that, said Kader. Now you know that for eternity you're one of us, traitor that you are. Of all the nights in my life, this must have been the longest and hardest. At least since I had to come to Nangiala, and almost the worst of it was that I had to lie there, listen to Jossie bragging about what he had planned for the destruction of Cherry Valley. He would soon be able to snare Sophia and Hubert, he said, both of them. But that must happen so that no one realizes who lies behind it. How could I otherwise continue to be your secret Tangleman in Cherry Valley? You won't be secret all that much longer, I thought. For here's one person who will expose you, so that you'll grow pale, you stupid red-cheeked wretch, you. But then he said something else, Jossie, something that made my heart lurch. Have you caught Jonathan Lionheart yet? Or is he still free in Wild Rose Valley? Vader and Kader did not like that question. I could see that. We're on his tracks, said Vader. 100 men are searching for him day and night. And we'll find him even if we have to search every single house in Wild Rose Valley, said Kader. Tangle is waiting for him. I can understand that, said Jossie. Young Lionheart is more dangerous than anyone else. I've told you that, for he truly is a lion. I felt proud as I lay there that Jonathan was such a lion, and what a comfort it was to know that he was alive. But I cried with rage when I realized what Jossie had done. He had betrayed Jonathan. Only Jossie could have found out about Jonathan's secret journey to Wild Rose Valley and sent a message about it to Tangle. It was Jossie's fault that 100 men were now searching day and night for my brother and would hand him over to Tangle if they found him. But he was alive, all the same. Just imagine, he was alive. And he was free too. So why had he called out in my dream? I wondered as I lay there whether I would ever know. Though I learned a lot about other things, too, when I was lying there listening to Jossie. That Hubert, he's envious of Sophia because we've chosen her as our leader in Cherry Valley, said Jossie, because Hubert thinks he's the best at everything. Ah, that was why. I remembered how angry Hubert had sounded that time when he had asked, "What's so special about Sophia?" Ah, so it was because he was envious, not for any other reason. You can become envious and still be a good man at the same time. But I had got it into my head from the start that Hubert was Cherry Valley's traitor, and everything he had done and said since, I had managed to fit in with it. Just think that it was so easy to imagine things wrongly about people. Poor Hubert. He had watched over me, saved my life, given me smoked meat as well, and in thanks I had only shouted at him, "Don't kill me!" No wonder he was furious. Forgive me, Hubert, I thought. Forgive me. I would say that to him if I ever met him again. Jossie was a little bit more confident now. He was quite pleased as he sat there, but I think the cutler mark stung him sometimes because he groaned a little every time Carter said, "Feel that, feel that." I wished I could have seen what that cutler mark looked like, though it was probably horrible, I imagine. So perhaps it was just as well I didn't see it. Jossie went on bragging about everything he had done and everything he was going to do, and suddenly he said, "Lionheart has a little brother whom he loves above all else." I cried silently and I longed for Jonathan. "We could use the poor little devil as a bait to get Sophia on the hook," said Jossie. "You numbskull, why didn't you tell us that before?" said Carter. "We could use the brother if we had him to force Lionheart out of his hiding place. For wherever he's hiding, he would certainly find out in some secret way what we had done, or he would certainly find out in some secret way that we had captured his brother." And that would bring him out," said Vader. "Free my brother and take me instead," he was bound to say, if he really minds about his brother and wants to protect him from all evil. I was so afraid now that I couldn't even cry anymore. But Jossie puffed himself out and he boasted. "I'll arrange that when I come home," he said. "I can lure little Color Lionheart into an ambush. That won't be difficult. I can do that with a few cakes. And then we can deceive Sophia into trying to save him." "Isn't Sophia too clever for you?" said Carter. "Do you think you could deceive her?" "Oh, yes, indeed I could," said Jossie. "And she won't even know who's doing it. She trusts me." Now he was so pleased with himself that he chuckled. "Ha! Then you'll have both her and little Lionheart. How many horses will Tangle give me for that when he marches into Cherry Valley?" That'll be something to see, I thought. Oh, Jossie, so you're going home to lure Color Lionheart into an ambush, are you? But if he's no longer in Cherry Valley, what will you do then? In the middle of all this wretchedness, the thought of how crestfallen Jossie would be when he found out that I had disappeared cheered me up. But then Jossie said, "Little Color Lionheart, he's nice, but he's certainly no lion. He's more easily scared, like a weakling. He should really be called Hareheart. That would be a much better name for him." I knew myself that I could never be at all brave, and that I shouldn't be called Lionheart like Jonathan. But all the same, it was terrible to hear Jossie say it. I felt ashamed as I lay there, and I thought that I must try to be a little braver, but not just now when I was so afraid. Jossie at last stopped. He had no more scoundrelly things to boast about, so he got up. "I must be home before daybreak," he said. They went on exhorting him until the last moment. "Make sure you do something about Sophia and that little brother," said Vader. "Rely on me," said Jossie, "but you mustn't do the boy any harm, because I do care for him a little bit." "Thank you, I noticed that," I thought. "And then don't forget the password if you bring news into Wild Rose Valley," said Carter. "If you want to be let in alive, that is." "All power to Tangle, our liberator," said Jossie. "No, I remember that day and night. And Tangle, he won't forget his promise to me, will he?" He had already mounted, ready to leave. "Jossie, chieftain of Cherry Valley," he said. "Tangle promised me that I would be that. He won't forget, will he?" "Tangle forgets nothing," said Carter. And then Jossie rode away, disappearing the same way as he had come, and Vader and Carter sat there watching him go. "That man," said Vader, "he'll go to Katla when we've finished with him in Cherry's Valley." He said it in such a way that you knew what it meant to fall into Katla's power. I knew so little about Katla, but I shuddered, and I almost felt sorry for Jossie, even though he was such a mean man. The fire in the glade had burned low, and I began to hope that Vader and Carter would also go away. I longed so that I ached to see them. I longed so that I ached to see him disappear. Like a rat in a trap, I wished to be free. If only I could get their horses out of the cave before someone came in to fetch them, then perhaps I would manage, I thought. And Vader and Carter would ride away without knowing how easily they could have captured Jonathan Lyon's little brother. But then I heard Carter say, "Let's go and sleep in the cave for a while." Oh, so the end has come, I thought. Well, just as well, as I cannot go on. Let them take me. By all means, put an end to it all. But then Vader said, "Why sleep? It'll soon be morning, and I've had enough of these mountains. I want to go back to Wild Rose Valley now." So Carter gave in. "As you like," he said. "Get the horses out." Sometimes when things are really dangerous, it is as if you saved yourself without even thinking. I threw myself backwards and scrambled into the darkest corner of the cave, just as the little animal might have done. I saw Vader coming through the entrance, but the next moment he was in the pitch darkness of the cave, and I could see him no longer, only hear him, and that was bad enough. He couldn't see me either, but he ought to have been able to hear my heart, how it thumped as I lay there, waiting for what was to come. When Vader found 3 horses instead of 2, maybe. They whinnied a little when Vader came in, all 3, Fjallar too. I would be able to recognize Fjallar's whinny amongst 1,000 others. But Vader, the fool, heard no difference. Just imagine, he never even noticed that there were 3 horses in the cave. He drove the 2 nearest to the entrance out, their own 2, and went after them himself. As soon as I was alone with Fjallar, I rushed over and put my hand on his nose. "Dear Fjallar, sweet, sweet Fjallar, please be quiet," I prayed inwardly, for I knew that if he now whinnied, they would hear out there and realize something was wrong. And Fjallar, he was so clever, it was as if he understood everything. The other horses whinnied outside, as if they wished to say farewell to him, but Fjallar stood quietly and did not answer. I saw Vader and Carter mount, and I cannot describe what a wonderful feeling that was. At last I would be free now and out of the rat trap, I thought. And then Vader said, "I've forgotten my tinderbox." And he jumped down from his horse and he began to search around the fire. And then he said, "It isn't here. Perhaps I dropped it in the cave." And that was how the rat trap closed in on me again, with a crash, and I was caught. Vader came into the cave to look for that wretched tinderbox, and he walked straight into Fjallar. I know that one shouldn't lie, but if it's a matter of life and death, you have to. He had hard hands too. No one had ever held me so roughly before. It hurt, and I was angry, almost more angry than afraid, strangely enough. Perhaps that's why I lied so well. "How long have you been here spying?" said Vader. as he dragged me out of the cave. "Since last night?" I said. "But I was only sleeping," I said, blinking in the morning light as if I had just woken up. "Sleeping?" said Vader. "Are you trying to tell me that you never heard us bellowing and singing out there by the fire? Don't lie now." He thought that he was being cunning, as they hadn't sung a single note. But I was even more cunning. "Well, perhaps I heard a little when you were singing," I stammered, as if I was lying to please him. And then Vader and Kader looked at each other. Now they knew for certain that I had been asleep and I hadn't heard a thing. But that didn't help much at all. "Don't you know it's the death penalty for traveling this way?" said Vader. I tried to look as if I didn't know anything about anything, not a thing about the death penalty or anything else. "If I only wanted to see the moonlight last night," I said. "And you risked your life for that, you little fox?" said Vader. "Where do you live? In Cherry Valley or in Wild Rose Valley?" "In Wild Rose Valley," I said, because Carl Lionheart lived in Cherry Valley, and I would rather die than tell them who I was. "Who are your parents?" said Vader. I live with I live with my grandfather," I said. "What's his name then?" said Vader. "I just call him grandfather," I said, making myself out to be even stupider. "Where does he live in Wild Rose Valley?" said Vader. In a little white house," I said, for I thought that the houses in Wild Rose Valley would probably be white, just like they were in Cherry Valley. "You can show us that grandfather and that white house," said Vader. "Up on that horse with you." So we rode away, and just then the sun rose behind Nangiala's mountains. The sky was ablaze with burning fire, and the mountain peaks were shining. I had never in my whole life seen anything more beautiful, anything more colossal. And if I hadn't had Kader and the black rump of his horse straight in front of me, I would have been jubilant. But I wasn't. No, indeed, I wasn't. The path continued to twist and turn just as before, but soon it ran deeply, steeply downhill, and I realized that we were approaching Wild Rose Valley. Yet I could scarcely believe when I suddenly saw it right below me. Oh, it was so beautiful. It was as beautiful as Cherry Valley, as it lay there in the morning light, with its small houses and farms, its green slopes and flowering wild rose thickets. Whole drifts of wild roses there everywhere. It looked so odd from above, almost like a sea with pink foam on the green waves. Yes, Wild Rose Valley was the right name for such a beautiful valley. But I would never have got into that valley without Vader and Kader, because there was a high wall which Tangle had forced the people to build, because he wanted them as bondsmen, imprisoned forever. Jonathan had told me that, so I knew. Vader and Kader must have forgotten to ask me how I had managed to get out of the closed valley, and I prayed to God that they would never remember to either, for what could I answer? How could anyone get over that wall, and with a horse as well? Tanglemen in black helmets and with swords and spears were on guard on top of the wall as far as I could see, and the gateway was just as well guarded. Yes, there was a gateway in the wall, just where the path from Cherry Valley came to an end. Here people had traveled freely between the valleys for centuries, and there was nothing but a closed gate, and you had to be a Tangleman to get through. Vader thundered on the gate with his sword. Then a little shutter opened, and a giant-like man stuck his head out. "Password!" he cried. Vader and Kader whispered the secret passwords into his ear, no doubt so that I shouldn't hear, but that was unnecessary, because I knew the words already. All power to Tangle, our liberator. The man behind the shutter looked at me and said, "And him? Who's he?" "It's a little oaf we found up in the mountains," said Kader. "But he can't all be that stupid, because he somehow managed to get through your gate last night. What do you say to that, senior guard? I think you should ask your men how they keep guard in the evenings." The man behind the shutter grew angry. He opened the gate, but he scolded and swore, and he was reluctant to let me in. Only Vader and Kader. "Put him in Cutler Cavern," he said. "He belongs there." But Vader and Kader were stubborn. "I must be allowed in," they said, "because I must prove that I hadn't lied to them. It was their duty to Tango to find out," they said. And with Vader and Kader as escorts, I rode through the gate. I thought then, if I ever saw Jonathan again, I would tell him how Vader and Kader had actually helped me into Wild Rose Valley, and he would laugh about that for a long time. But I was not laughing, because I knew how bad things actually were for me. I had to find a white house with a grandfather in it. Otherwise, I would end up in Cutler Cavern. "Ride on ahead and show us the way," said Vader, "for we must speak seriously to your grandfather." There were plenty of white houses, just like at home in Cherry Valley, but I didn't see one that I could point out, as I didn't know who lived in them. I didn't dare. "Grandfather lives here," for supposing Vader and Kader went in, and there was not even one single little old man anywhere. And what if this person even wanted to be my grandfather? Now I was truly in a mess, and I sweated as I rode along. It had been so easy to invent a grandfather, but now I no longer thought it was such a good idea. I saw people working outside their houses, but nowhere anyone who resembled a grandfather, and I began to feel more and more miserable. It was terrible, too, to see how things were with the people in Wild Rose Valley, how pale and hungry and unhappy they all were. At least those I saw as I rode along. So unlike the people of Cherry Valley. But then, we had no Tangle in our valley, who enslaved us and took from us everything we had to live on. I rode, and Vader and Kader began to get impatient, but I just rode on as if I were on my way to the end of the world. "Is it much further?" said Vader. "No, no, not far," I said. But I didn't know what I was saying or doing. I was terrified, just waiting to be thrown into Cutler Cavern. But then a miracle happened. Believe it or not, outside a little white house, an old man was sitting on a bench just by the wall, feeding his pigeons. Perhaps I would never have dared to do it if there hadn't been one snow white pigeon in amongst all those grey ones, just one. Tears came into my eyes. I had seen pigeons like that only at Sophia's, and then once on my windowsill that long time ago in another world. And then I did an unheard of thing. I jumped down from Fjallar. In 2 leaps, I was with the old man. I threw myself into his arms, and with my arms around his neck, I whispered in despair. I whispered, "Help me, save me, please, please say that you are my grandfather." I was so frightened, and I was sure that he would push me away when he saw Vader and Kader in their black helmets behind me. Why should he lie for my sake and perhaps end up in Cutler Cavern because of it? But he didn't push me away. He held me tight, and I felt his kind, good arms around me like a protection against all evil. "Little lad," he said, so loudly that Vader and Kader could hear him. "Little lad, where have you been all this time, and what have you done, unhappy child, to return home with soldiers?" My poor grandfather, what a scolding he got from Vader and Kader. They scolded and said that if he didn't keep his grandchildren in better order, but let them roam about in Nangayala's mountains, then soon he would have no grandchild left. He would see, so that he would never forget it. But they would let it go for this time, they said at last, and then they rode away. Their helmets could soon be seen as nothing but small black dots on the hillside below us. Then I began to cry. I was still in my grandfather's arms, and I just cried and cried, for the night had been so long and hard, and now it was at last over. And my grandfather, he let me. He was just rocking me a little, and I wished, oh, how I wished he could actually be my real grandfather. I tried to tell him that, although I was crying. "Well, I can probably be your grandfather," he said, "but otherwise my name is Matthias. What's yours?" "Carly," I began, but then I stopped. How could I be so foolish as to say that name here in Wild Rose Valley? Grandfather dear, my name is Secret, I said, but you can call me Rusky. Oh, Rusky, is it? Said Matthias, laughing a little. Go on into the kitchen, Rusky, and wait for me there, he went on. I'll just put your horse in the stable. I went into a poor little kitchen with nothing but a table and a wooden sofa and a few chairs and a hearth. There was nothing. Oh, sorry. There was also a big sideboard along one wall. Matthias soon came back, and then I said, We've got a big sideboard like that in our kitchen too, at home in And then I stopped. At home in Cherry Valley, said Matthias, and I looked anxiously at him. Once again I had said what mustn't be said. But Matthias said nothing else. He went over to the window and looked out, standing there for a long time, looking about as if he wanted to be sure that there was no one around. And then he turned to me and said in a low voice, Though there's something special about that sideboard. Wait a minute, and you'll see. He put his shoulder against the sideboard and pushed it aside. Behind it was a shutter in the wall. He opened it, and inside there was a room, a very small room. Someone was lying asleep on the floor. It was Jonathan. Here you can see how he found his grandfather. It wasn't really his grandfather, of course. And over here, you can see that Carl saw Jonathan lying asleep on the floor. This was a very long chapter. I hope you enjoyed it. It was very exciting, wasn't it? Now I could see that there was one person following it live. I hope the rest of you will enjoy it when you listen to it at a later point. Bye.